This episode is brought to you by Painless Pregnancy. In case you missed it, I worked with Painless Pregnancy very soon after the birth of my third baby, and honestly, I wish I had found them earlier in my childbearing journey. I am so excited to tell you all about Painless Pregnancy and how, no matter where you are in your motherhood journey, the Painless Pregnancy team can guide you through happy and healthy pregnancies, postpartum healing, and beyond. Stay tuned for our promo code so you can get 10% off of your first visit with Painless Pregnancy.
Welcome to the No Podcast with me, Nikki Spo.
What is up, my loves? You are listening to The No, where it is not about knowing everything, but about coming to know ourselves. I am your hostess, Nikki Spolstra, and I am so glad that you're here because today we are going to chat about a pretty controversial topic, which is polyamory and consensual non-monogamy. Buckle up, babes, because it's going to get hot, but also very real. So before I introduce today's guest, here's your reminder to subscribe to the show on whichever platform you are listening in on so that you never miss a new drop. New episodes come out every Tuesday, and you just never know what I'm going to talk about next these days, honeys, because my life is like the wild, wild west out here, living and loving and thriving and talking about all the things so that I, along with my listeners, can continue to learn and grow and ultimately keep coming home to myself every single day. So that brings me to Dr. Joli Hamilton. Dr. Joli Hamilton is the relationship coach for couples who color outside of the lines, and she is the founder of The Year of Opening. She is a research psychologist, a TEDx speaker, a best-selling author, and ASECT certified sex educator. Oh my gosh. Joli also co-hosts the Playing with Fire podcast with her co-anchor partner, Ken. Joli's been featured in the New York Times, Vogue, Cosmo, and NPR. She has spent the past 2 decades studying and reimagining what love can be if we open our imaginations to possibility. Not gonna lie, my friends, this episode requires a lot of open-mindedness, like from you, but also from me, as our conversation will touch on non-monogamous relationships, which, let's be real, aren't for everybody. I'm here learning along with you, and I think it's a gift to be able to speak with someone like Dr. Joli, who helps people create non-monogamous, custom-built partnerships where there's no more shrinking, no more pretending, or hiding required. Keep an open mind. You might find yourself pleasantly surprised and at the very least more informed on human nature, human preferences, and what it could feel like to make your own rules in a relationship, regardless of what those rules might look like. So with that, let's get started. Joli, Dr. Joli Hamilton, welcome to The No, where it is not about knowing everything, but about coming to know ourselves. I think in your line of work and helping couples come to a place where they can really genuinely and honestly create their own rules for their relationships in itself is an act of vulnerability, coming home to yourself and having a deep sense of inner knowing within us that, so many of us crave. And I'm just really excited for our conversation today.
Oh, Nikki, thank you so much for having me. And I'm so grateful to hear your intro be about knowing yourself. For me, non-monogamy is a journey to knowing yourself better. And that doesn't mean that everybody's going to be like, yeah, bring me more partners. It also doesn't mean that everybody's going to be way over on the monogamy end. This is a spectrum. We got to find where we want our relationships to be and custom design them.
Totally. I'm here for it. So, I'm really fascinated by your Jungian approach to things. I studied art history in college, in undergrad, and there was we talked a lot about Carl Jung and his teachings and the impact that had on artists and society. And I just want you to kind of open up by telling us about what it means to be a Jungian and archetypal psychologist. Can you break that down for us?
Yeah, absolutely. And thank you for asking, because it is different from what we think of. Typically, people think about psychologists as therapists. And I like to say, let's actually back out a second. Psychology, psyche, from Greek to mean breath, or maybe to mean spirit. But psyche is something so much bigger than what we think of today as therapy. I studied Jungian and archetypal psychology because I really care about what's going on in our unconscious, what's going on in the aspects of us that we don't know that are really, really kicking our ass from the inside out. And I also care about the symbolic life. The Jungian approach is one that looks at everything, every symptom, every symbol as an opportunity to know more, not just about ourselves personally, but also to know about the collective. So
that's amazing. So just to give you a little bit of context, I worked with a Gottman therapist for a bit. This one therapist gave me like a bunch of different cards, and they all had different values, if you will, on them. And she was like, okay, now you have to take this maybe 150 cards, and you have to pick your top 10 values. And then once you pick your top 10 values, you have to go a step further and then put them in order. And I remember feeling like a deep sense of shame doing this exercise, because I'm like, oh my gosh, I realized that aesthetics are like really important to me, right? That beauty is really important to me. And that's just not just like with myself and my personal appearance, but like everything around me. Like I, as a human being, Dr. Joli, I want everything around me to be beautiful. And beauty is so subjective, right? Like, and you touched on it a little bit, which I love, is that it can be like scary and horrifying at the same time. And in this wild, roundabout way, I think that some of the things that have gotten me through like my hardest times in life, and like the trauma and like the really difficult things that I've faced in recent years, especially, is like being able to see the beauty in some of the really, really ugly parts of life. And I think that even without me knowing so much about Jungian philosophies, I only had a very brief overview, as one might have in undergrad, I think that always stuck with me on some level. And in my own subconscious, I'm like, oh yeah, that energy, like even the ugly parts are really, really beautiful, and like they're shaping, and they allow me to shapeshift and alchemize and all of these things. So I love that you said that, the symbolic life. I know for myself that I used to feel a lot of shame around having aesthetics be at like one of the top of my values, and like wanting everything around me to be beautiful. And now I just kind of embrace it. And I love that about myself, and I love that about my life. And I see how it bleeds into something that's not just like material, right? Because it's not just material, it's a spiritual thing.
Right, because what you're building around you, if that is a reflection of the beauty you are cultivating within, then that makes sense. What worries me when someone says that they care about aesthetics, and what they mean is they care about things looking good on the outside, but they don't care what kind of shit's going on the inside, that will be worrisome. But that's not what you're talking about at all. When we talk about archetypal levels of beauty, we are talking about an inner pattern reflected in our outer world. There's a certain symmetry to that we find beautiful. And that means it can be messy. It can be, Jackson Pollock is a beautiful mess, right? There are so many artists who have represented this to us, but we tend to get a little reductive and imagine that somehow that's superficial. It's not superficial. It's about how you're actually living it, and whether that's coming from a deep sense of embodied you, real authenticity.
That's what this is all about, right? Is that deep sense of inner knowing. And like, we're trying to like give words to a feeling that is hard to really describe the feeling. Like, and so part of these conversations is like bringing to life and putting into like something that people can really, really grab onto and have context and have something to like tangible that they can really identify with, is this sense of deep inner knowing, because like it's a feeling and it's hard to explain it unless you've experienced it. But I think a lot of us really, really want that.
When we talk about authenticity, sometimes we forget that is going to be one of the trickiest things that humans can ever really try to communicate about. Because what is authentic to me is a reflection. It's my interiority that I'm trying to find a way to bridge to you. And all I have is language, image, symbol. Like that's all I've got. That's why being with someone in friendship or in romance or in connection is so powerful, because I am making myself visible by sharing myself with you. And that space between us becomes sacred.
And that's so hard to do, right? Because there's ego at play. There's all of these other elements at play where like we don't really want to show ourselves. And like, how can I allow you to see me at my ugliest version, like the most down and ugly and hateful version of myself? Because listen, we all have that in us. I don't care. Like you could be healed as fuck and like still be like you have an ugly bit in you. I used to like joke that I have bad bones. I don't believe that I have bad bones anymore. I think that I am a human, and that I am a whole ass human that is so complex. Right. And so I used to feel truly, Dr. Joli, a lot of shame around this. And now I'm just like, okay, like this is part of me, and you do the best that I can. But as we get into that, because I mentioned the ego, I want you to also break down the 4 main Jungian archetypes.
Before we break down the 4 main ones, can we break down the concept of archetype and just say what it is, because we often forget to define it. So an archetype could be thought of as a universal pattern of human behavior, right? It's something that we just have within us. It could be thought as similar to an instinct, but at sort of the other end of the spectrum, rather than at the deeply embodied end. An archetype is at the deeply psychological end, right? And so when you talk about the 4 main archetypes, I giggled for just a moment because we try to get reductive about archetypes, which is ridiculous. Archetype literally means that it is about the typical situations, right? There are so many. There are innumerable archetypes. But typically, people come to think about the child, the self, the shadow, the parent, the other. These are the ones that I work with most frequently in my work with people because we're talking about relationships. And so I need to come to know the child. I need to come to know the parental archetypes, the other. The other is all of the others that we find in our romances, the shadow. And if I don't recognize the shadow, that dark bit that you were talking about in there, that messy, horrible, evil bit that's in there, if I don't recognize that, I'm going to project it all over other people.
Oh my gosh, you just got chills.
And I also want to come into connection with the self, the capital S self. The self is it's a complex within me that I want to come into connection with. The self is entirely personal, but also transpersonal. When I think about archetypes, I also think about, hey, if those don't resonate for you, don't give up on Jungian psychology. There's so much depth to it. And so when you look in those books that say like, hey, let's look at the 12 archetypes, or you go pull off a men's workbook that might list 4 archetypes, there's more. If the ones that are listed don't resonate for you, that's okay. You're human and you have access to a much broader imagination. But when we do get in touch with those archetypal patterns, we start to recognize our similarities to the other, and we start to tap into the collective unconscious, this massive potential that all humans have. And in order to do any healing, we're tapping into that collective, but we're also healing the collective.
There's 2 things I want to touch on. The first one is I want to share something vulnerable with my audience because I think it's relevant. But in my late teen and early adult, like early 20s, like I was told pretty regularly that I was evil.
Oh.
Like I remember feeling like so angry about that because like I don't believe that I'm evil and from the devil, right? I believe that I'm a whole person, and that these things, when you allow yourself, when you show yourself to the world, or you come out into the world as exactly who you are, it's hard for people to hold all that.
Mm-hmm.
It's not easy. And Brene Brown talks about ways in which people share their trauma, right? Is like not everybody you can't share your trauma with everybody because not everybody just has the capacity to hold it. And that's okay. I spent years thinking like, beginning to believe this like story about myself, believing that I was bad. And it took years and years of therapy and work and like deep inner reflection and ultimately my sobriety to like come to a place where I was like, oh no, that's not true. Or it is true. And
let's hold the beautiful tension of opposites, right? What if you were at that time in your life providing a safe place for people who had not dealt with their own shadow, with their own bullshit, to project all of that onto you, to scapegoat evil onto Nikki. They can then eject you from their life. They can send you out. And now they don't have to hold their own shadow. They can put all the bad on others. We do this all day, every day. We project onto the other our shadow, and then we either cut them off or we keep them close and we keep telling them that it's in them. The problem is in them. If we want to feel differently about the people in our lives, we have to digest this shadow material. And I'm so sorry that you received this claim that you were evil, because what I hear is that you also identified with it to some degree. Many of us will find ourselves at some point in life identifying with shadow qualities. It is a way of protecting yourself. There is a real safety in saying, yeah, and you know what? Hang on, watch this, hold my beer, I'm going to double down.
Right.
And I was actually raised very similarly. I was scapegoated in my family and needed to hold a lot of that shadow, and still experience that in my day-to-day life frequently, because I know I happen to be a good projection screen for that, because there's a seed of truth in it. I know that I contain the potential for evil.
Right, because there is the seed. You're like, I actually know that there's a seed there, so this is true. This
yes.
True. And not just that it must be true in a part, and that is the seed, but it must be true as a whole.
The way a projection sticks so beautifully is if there's a little seed of that, a seed of awareness in you, then when the projection, imagine the other person is a projector and they're projecting onto you, you catch that projection. And for some people, the projection comes onto them and they look down and they're like, oh, that's not me. That's yours, actually. I see that. That's yours. Or you go to therapy and your therapist reminds you who you actually are and the complexity of your whole ass personness, and you return that projection to them. But many of us find ourselves caught in projective identifications, where now the projection has landed on me and I feel how it plucks the string of that, like, oh, yes, that is in me. You're right.
Well, right.
Oh, that is all of me. And we start to sink down in a spiral of, this is what I am. This is who I am. This is my truth. And one way to stay safe in that is to say, yeah, fuck y'all. That is who I am. And you better watch out. Another way is to get really, really honest and grieve the fact that those people are harming you and that you may have to boundary and limit your relationships with some of these people who are projecting, at least while you gain the ego strength. This is where the ego is actually incredibly important.
Wow.
We need the ego strength to stand and say, wait, that is not my totality.
That is so beautiful. And I know that somebody listening right now really, really needs to hear that.
This is really deep work. If you are in that spot, I encourage you to journal, to listen to your dreams, to start writing down what's going on inside of you. Because if you can start to just sort out what is being projected onto me versus what is authentically mine, that's the beginning of individuation.
I love that. In my years of like being in therapy and also interviewing like tons of therapists, is that I think psychology and therapy as a whole is moving away from like, I know this from people who diagnose personality disorders, that there's like a general moving away of like, this is a narcissist and this is bipolar. This is like, because it's not really all one thing. It's like multiple things. And like you mentioned, like we as humans, I think we want to reduce it in an attempt to find the answer.
It's not just wanting to find an answer. It is that. And also remember, our mental health care is a product of a machine that needs to simplify things because it's run on capitalism, right? So we need the DSM-5 because we need to be able to put a code next to these things and say, this is the problem and this is how much money it's going to cost to quote unquote fix it. The thing is, I actually have no problem with that. If you feel well held in that therapeutic system, in that model, wonderful. That's great. That means that story is working for you and that's great. But if you don't, or if you have felt like you were reduced, or if you have felt like you were unseen, another option is to look at your symptoms as a very clear but distant picture of who you are. Your symptoms are a wonderful way to start to see what the heck is going on in there. So if you can work with someone from whatever modality they've chosen to work in, if they can see that your symptoms are information about who you are, what's going on, where your trauma is, what your stories are, what your stories about your sensations are, all of that, then you can be in a working relationship with someone who sees you. Yes, they might have to write down a DSM code, but hopefully they also work past that into a deeper vision of you as a whole person.
I think that's really important. And I think that like a lot of people get stuck with just shitty therapists, right? And I hate even saying that because it's like, why is this person a shitty therapist? It's not necessarily that they're shitty. Like, it's just that you don't know what you don't know until you know it.
Yeah. And the training for therapists is not uniform, right? Remember, everybody has different training. Also, everybody comes in with different skill sets. Everybody comes in with different motivations. And I struggled with therapy for years. And then I trained as a research psychologist. Then I went and got another master's degree after my doctorate in mental health counseling because I wanted to know what I hadn't been trained in my depth psychological training. And what I found was that I resonated with a broader perspective, a more depth and analytical perspective. And I had an analyst who said to me in his 90s, he said, well, remember, whenever you're seeing a therapist or an analyst or anyone, you have to take seriously their unconscious, what they do not know about themselves, about the system, and about the systems they're working in. And that is just the mire that it is to be a human, right? We have to give them grace. Like it's not just about, hey, get the next training. It's also about, wow, we're all in a mess here. Being a human is messy and difficult, and we aren't given skills from the get-go. So most of my clients tend to be over the age of 35, and they're starting to realize, oh, I want more. I need more of myself. I need more access to myself. And so it's not so much about fixing a set of symptoms. It is about recovering more of themselves. And they often don't even know where to start in therapy because they're like, well, there's no problem. Yeah, there's not a problem because you aren't a problem. But we do need to get to know you more deeply. And all those things that you're using to not be known, we're going to have to take those things off. We got to shed that armor. It's hard.
I love when people like weave the word known in, because like, just, I think for me personally, I felt like I did not know myself. I feel like I did not know who I was. And like that homecoming is surreal. Like when you, and also like understanding that homecoming happens over and over and over and over and over again in so many different times and ways in your life, right? Like life is like attending hundreds of funerals of yourself and rebirths of yourself. By the way, Dr. Joli, I think it's really important that we like kind of started with this.
I love this.
It really gives us kind of like a platform to jump off into like the next, like bigger, the meat and potatoes of what this episode really is. And it's like how you coach people and couples into safe, consensual, non-monogamous relationships and polyamory. And so you help people build relationships that fit their desire for a less conventional life, right? But like the term less conventional is a societal notion, isn't it?
It is. I mean, non-monogamy's existed the whole time, and we can find it across cultures. Like, it's just, how does it look? And in the current milieu that we find ourselves in, monogamy is what we think of as the norm. It's tradition. It's what is. It's right. Some people don't even know that anything else exists, but white middle-class people did not invent this. It's been around the whole time.
And so what does it mean to you to have a less conventional life if we're not thinking about like what the societal notion of it is?
I want everyone to get really, really clear, do deep self-awareness work, and allow themselves to acknowledge what they actually need, want, desire, and absolutely do not, what they require in their life, all of that. And then from there, to co-construct with one or more other people a life that actually brings all of that together consciously. That means attending to the fact that we can't always have all of our needs met at once. And yet, most of the time, I find people are setting aside needs for decades at a time, thinking, well, if I can even get like a couple of my needs met, and in particular, the ones that our culture at large tends to reinforce.
Mind blown, yes.
Then I'll just settle for that. Maybe later I'll get that other adventure. Maybe.
It's got the heebie-jeebies.
Yeah, I don't want anybody to wait. I see so many people come into my office in their late 40s to early 60s who are like, okay, I did the thing. I like got the job, did the thing, raised the kids. If I don't explore now, when will I? Uh-oh.
That's the thing, but I think she's talking about getting married. I don't know.
Yeah, the one rule to rule them all. We grow up. We fall in love. We're supposed to get married. We're supposed to have the kids. We're supposed to have the right job, get the house, all the things. I like being married, by the way. I am married. I am also non-monogamous. I like being married. It doesn't have to be an either or, but in order to consciously choose something more. I don't like the demonization, right? We tend to imagine that polyamorous people are like, our way is the best way and everyone should be this way. You know, I don't actually know any polyamorous people who think that. Every polyamorous person I know is like, oh, baby, I would not necessarily recommend it. However, if you feel called to have multiple partners, let's do it well. Let's do this well. Let's not cheat. Let's not lie. Let's build a life where this can be done in a nice way that weaves in just the right amount of openness for you and lets you not hurt other people and treat them like objects.
I told somebody not too long ago, I said, I'm not in the business of breaking hearts. I am not entertaining a polyamorous lifestyle. Like that isn't something that I'm currently like seeking or trying to entertain. But like, I do believe that like, for me, as I go out into this new chapter of my life, being a single woman, I'm like not in the business of breaking hearts. Like I'm here, I come in peace. I want happy. I want you to be happy. Like let's figure out what we need to figure out in order to get to that space, you know, and that might not be with each other.
Right. Or not for very long. Maybe they're short term.
Maybe it's like, right.
And hey, let's also mention that polyamory is not synonymous with being in a dating phase of your life. You get to date. You get to identify as a monogamous person who happens to be dating broadly because you're not in a committed long-term relationship right now. The words ethical non-monogamy and consensual non-monogamy and polyamory have entered our conventional talk. Like we're seeing them everywhere. A lot of people have now started to use them as if they're a stand-in for being Joey Tribbiani and Friends. No, Joey's just out dating. He's not polyamorous. He's just out dating. That's all. If you're in your Joey phase, be in your Joey phase. That's fine. You do that as long as you want. You can do it your whole damn life. But if you want polyamory or you want consensual non-monogamy, that's telling me you want to build relationships that can have and center around commitments, different kinds of commitments, perhaps, different maybe intensities of commitments. But you want to do that in a way that allows you to let each relationship become what that relationship's going to become and not say, oh, this has to be an either or. You want to leave behind the paradigm that says, if I love you, I can't want sex with them. And I can't, oh my gosh, I'm kind of in love with my best friend. I am. Wait, I didn't even know I was bi. Am I bi? Does that mean I'm bi? Maybe. I don't know. What if you're just the kind of person who loves multiply?
That's really, really beautiful.
We don't have to act on that in a particular way either, because there is no single way to do non-monogamy. It is by its nature going to be a stripping away of what we think are the truths and then a finding of our truth and being able to express it to the other. Again, I have to be able to communicate that. So that's what I do. In the year of opening, we spend so much of our time on self-awareness and really starting to peel the onion and understand. I see non-monogamy as an opportunity to get to know yourself better by really questioning all the things that you imagine to be truths that are just the expectations of a culture. The culture gets to have expectations, but if we peel those away, some of them we're going to be like, ooh, I like that one. I'm putting it back on. I like it. That's good. That fits me. Some of them we're going to be like, ooh, ick. That felt bad. That never fit. I don't like it. And we're going to then craft a realistic life for you that actually works for you. And that might mean a lot of partners. It might mean one partner. It might be one partner, but with a creative imagination about what the future might bring, so we don't shut the door completely. There are so many ways to go about this.
All right, my loves, I want to pause and take a moment to thank our sponsor for today's episode, Painless Pregnancy. I have been working consistently with painless pregnancy since the birth of my third baby, and I truly cannot sing their praises enough, which is why I'm so excited that they have come on as a partner for the Know with Nikki Spo. Painless Pregnancy is the leading in-home concierge physical therapy company focusing on the pregnant and postpartum woman. Not only do they provide incredibly valuable services to those women in pain or dysfunction, but they also offer every aspect of wellness. This means that they take care of you during your pregnant and postpartum season of life. They keep you strong and flexible. They keep your pants dry and your sex pain-free. They even do all of the body work needed to maximize your delivery. If you are currently pregnant or have ever been pregnant, you need to reach out to them. They are skilled in assisting with like a bajillion women-specific needs, such as pregnancy and postpartum, obviously, vaginal and C-section deliveries, pelvic floor therapy, physical therapy, diastasis recti, urinary incontinence, fecal incontinence, pelvic organ prolapse, and overall having a healthy pregnancy. I know. Some of this stuff is cringe, but these are like real things that happen, and oftentimes women don't want to talk about them. And you know me, I'm going to talk about it. So if you or anyone you know is on a motherhood journey, I highly recommend reaching out to Painless Pregnancy, no matter what season of motherhood that you're in. Use my code NikkiSpo10 for 10% off of your initial visit. For more information, be sure to check out the sponsors page at nikkispo.com or check out Painless Pregnancy directly at www.painless-pregnancy.com. Until every woman heals, having this team in your corner to take care of your body is everything.
So in your TEDx talk, you discussed how jealousy plays a role in this, and your term for compersion, which essentially means the opposite of jealousy. So let's talk about that, because I think that like it is human nature to be jealous. I think that we experience it. And I listened and watched your TED talk, and I know this that jealousy presents like from early childhood. And now that I'm a mother, I see it. And it's not that I'm teaching jealousy. I'm not teaching jealousy. It occurs.
It occurs from the inside out. It's archetypal.
Right. And it's widely shamed.
Yes. So jealousy is a complex emotion, right? It comes packing all these other emotions with it. Anger, sadness, grief, joy, even for some people, because you might get a little schadenfreude, right? You might get that. And it also can bring envy and shame. We wind up really struggling with jealousy because jealousy was built into us to keep us connected to our primary caregivers when we're babies. Very important. I need to stay connected to them for safety, for food, for shelter, all the things. And so I don't want any interruption in this valuable relationship that I have. I don't want siblings or other babies. I don't want any of that. And we have studies showing that babies will freak a little bit out if mom looks at a realistic baby doll and starts attending to a realistic baby doll, but not if she's reading a book, right? So this is a sign that jealousy is present as early as 5-6 months old. They start to be aware, hey, I'm at threat. We put jealousy away. We usually teach our kids to share. We're like, good, now they won't be jealous little creatures because ick. But we never really work with it. And I've done thousands of interviews and conversations on jealousy. Nobody's ever said, yeah, my parents really worked consciously with me around the jealousy I felt. We just don't have a great narrative. We have collectively shoved jealousy into the shadow. Even the APA.
Don't be jealous.
Don't be jealous. And jealousy is a negative emotion according to the APA's dictionary. Anger and sadness are not listed as negative emotions.
Really?
Yeah. Because they're complicated. They have something to tell us, right? They're information. So does jealousy. So when jealousy shows up, usually it appears again in a big way in puberty when we start dating. And then it shows up in our romantic relationships later. Now, almost none of us are given this word that is the opposite of jealousy while also being able to be felt at the same time as jealousy. The word is compersion. It's been around since the 90s, this word. It came out of the polyamorous world in the San Francisco Bay Area, Corista community, coined this word, compersion. And if you know what compersion is, you have something to at least aim at when you're like, okay, I'm jealous. And what if I'm feeling jealousy? I'm feeling the threat of my valued love bond. But what if I am also feeling happy for them? And in polyamory specifically, we need this concept because if I truly embrace my non-monogamous life with them, and they are flirting across the room with someone, and I can see from across the room that they are experiencing some success, and maybe somebody's just reached over and touched his arm, and I'm like, oh, I might feel a wave of jealousy rise up. Like you said, it's just there. It comes up. Sometimes it comes up and it feels like we're going to vomit even. It feels so intense. Jealousy comes up. But if I also can hold that, oh, my partner's being seen, they're being recognized, they're being known, they're being seen for who they are. Oh, I'm happy for them. That's compersion. And I can be feeling both of those at the same time.
That is so beautiful.
It's also challenging.
No, but I'm like playing it out in my monogamous style brain where I'm like, okay, like I was the public figure and like I can see, I have eyeballs, right? Like I can see the things.
Yeah.
So I'm thinking like monogamous relationships as a whole, like anybody who has a partner and go out and they get a little bit of attention, you're like, do you want to like buck up in there and be like, well, I'm here, hello. Right? Like observe it and hold it and be like, oh, wow, that person is being seen. Like you said, I really do think that's so beautiful. I've never heard this term compersion before. I want to take it with me and practice it in my real life.
So my friend and colleague, Dr. Marie Tuin, and another colleague, Dr. Sharon Flicker, wrote a dictionary entry for compersion for one of the bigger psychotherapeutic like journals. Like here's a dictionary of terms, and they added compersion because compersion is still not in our dictionaries, even though it's been used since the 90s. But the beautiful thing about this entry is the first two definitions have to do with the non-monogamous perspective. We're holding it like joy for my partner's joy when they're experiencing pleasure or when they're experiencing success. But the third definition that they added is, hey, what if we apply this to a broader worldview? What if we say that compersion is actually quite similar to the Buddhist concept of mudita, of sympathetic joy, of feeling joyful when a person I care about is experiencing pleasure, joy, happiness of their own, even though it's not mine. And I liken this to if you watch a kid have an ice cream cone and you're lactose intolerant and you're like, oh, I would like to, but that is not going to work for me. But you feel the joy for them too. That is the seed. That's a little baby version of conversion.
This definition is something that a lot of us can take with us, whether or not we choose, like regardless of what type of lifestyle we choose to lead.
Yeah, totally.
I know how skeptical people can be, like myself included, but I think it's human nature to question things, right? But I happen to have had the privilege of doing my own research about you and all of the work that you do and your expertise. What is ASECT and how does that qualify a coach, a therapist? What is that?
We live in a society that has certain regulatory bodies and also certain certifying bodies. And so if you go to see, say, a doctor and they say, oh, I'm an MD and I'm board certified, you know that they have done certain things. They've passed certain requirements to provide the services that they're providing. ASECT, the American Association of Sex Educators, Counselors, and Therapists, is a similar certifying board that says, hey, in order to provide sex education, counseling, or therapy, we need to know that you have educated yourself, that you have practiced, that you've done your internships, you've done the things, and that your colleagues have seen you do the things, and they're like, yes, this person. So getting an ASECT certification for sex education was part of my journey because I knew I wanted to study jealousy as part of my doctorate program. So I've been doing sex education in a casual way for quite a long time. And I decided, you know what, I'm going to level up. I'm going to take this really seriously. And that was wonderful for me because it gave me a breadth of knowledge, but it also allows me to think about sexuality and sexuality related topics in relationships and know where my lane is. And not everybody should be talking about every topic.
That's why I interview. The show is not about me knowing the things. I'm like, I would need to talk to you because you know something I don't know.
Yeah. So I have spent so much time specializing in non-monogamy, jealousy specifically. That is what my independent research is on. And on sexuality broadly, I focus on kink. I focus on the imagination of kink. And then I take all of that and I apply my Jungian lens because I trained as a PhD level Jungian. So I apply a Jungian lens to sexuality as a whole.
You're so fucking cool.
I totally love it. It's really, really fun. It's awesome. But you know what I don't do? I don't go to my local K through 12 schools and teach them how to put condoms on. I could. I learned how, but I don't practice that. We get to specialize. So I love looking at somebody's certifications and saying, awesome, I know they did the baseline there. Now I want to know, what do you specialize in? What did you then go seek out even more? What pulls you? What is right at the core of your work? And for me, it's the intersection of the Jungian archetypal lens and the sexuality and relationship lens. And I look right there and I say, oh, for me, getting really conscious about our relationships and what we want out of our sex lives, that is an opportunity for me to individuate, to become more and more myself over time. And to never be done knowing myself, to just keep engaging in an ongoing process of becoming. So I love that area because that's what I believe humans are here to do.
So how do you think that books like Mating in Captivity by Esther Perel have had an impact on society and our general knowledge of it? Because she's become really popular and regular old people who might not have been interested in this topic are finding themselves with these books on their laps.
I love that Esther Perel has gone above and beyond to be inclusive of relationship styles most of the time. Really has kept an open mind to, hey, this doesn't have to work for everyone. This is about you being good, being in excellence, being in virtuosity about relationships.
Oh, I love that.
That's
virtuosity of relationships.
Yeah. So that's my goal. I am not a proponent of non-monogamy. I'm a proponent of questioning compulsory monogamy. And so I think books like Mating in Captivity can be a gateway to, whoa, what if I question what I think is the truth and instead look for truth, lowercase t across the board. It's funny because I'm wearing my truth bracelet. So
I love that.
Laughing.
Also, another book and author that I came across was Emily Morse, and Dr. Emily Morse wrote a book called Smart Sex. I had the privilege of going to a book signing where she spoke and there was a panel and everybody got to ask questions, and she does this thing where she hands out a sex card, right? And it basically has a very extensive list of all sex activities, right?
Yep.
That you and your partner can go through together and be like, yes, no, maybe.
Yep.
Right?
Yes, no, maybe lists.
Right.
Love them.
And I'm like, I think this card is the most fascinating thing. And I'm like, I want to hand it out to everybody. Not everybody.
Well, yeah, but like, what a great conversation. And you can, right now, anybody can Google yes, no, maybe list. There are tons of them available on the internet. There are some that are scaled for vanilla folks. There are some that are scaled for kinky folks. There are some that are scaled for people in power dynamics. Go for it. And this is exactly it. There's also something out there by Max Hill called the Relationship Smorgasbord. And that is just a free diagram that Max has developed. I think he's on version 6 at this point. It's been around for years. It's about being really intentional about, hey, where are our lives going to overlap? Instead of saying we have to be on the relationship escalator and every relationship needs to follow this pattern of we start dating and at a certain point we define the relationship as exclusive, and after that we have to move in together, and after that we have to buy a house together, and after on and on and on. Instead of doing that, what if we look at, he just has this beautiful diagram of, hey, do you want to overlap in romance and sex? Do you want to overlap in child rearing? Do you want to overlap in having pets together? Do you want to overlap in intellectual projects? Where do you want to overlap with each person in your life? It's way beyond romance. So good.
Wow. I think that's really interesting as I'm, again, like in this chapter of being like a co-parent, right?
Yes.
Like I'm a co-parent now, and like my romantic life with my co-parent is no longer, right?
Yep, but that's just one little piece.
Right. We still have our co-parenting relationship where we are child rearing together for the best interest of our children, right? And that component, there is that component that no longer is.
Right. And then you can grieve that, let it go and still relate. So you're still in a relationship. It's just a different relationship. And you could also, we could flip that on its end and say, what if I am a divorced person? What if I had chosen a person to rear children with, who I knew I could rear children with, but I didn't get worried about whether I romantically overlapped with them because that wasn't something that we were like, you know what, that's actually not the most important thing for me to do with you as a co-parent. We could actually completely revolutionize how relationships work if we got really clear about what it is that our relationships are for. The number one question I ask people to do to begin transforming their relationships is define the purpose of this relationship now. And then revisit that question over and over again. And over time, allow that purpose to change and find where the Venn diagram of the two of you or the three of you or four of you, where can it overlap? I know 4 people who happen to be raising children together. They absolutely have one of the most beautiful relational structures I've ever seen. They all raise children together. They all also have other partners, other whole lives at some points. Like just there's so much else going on, but they all co-parent. They're all committed to that co-parenting. Their children have one of the most stable experiences I've ever seen because they are clear about the fact that their romantic overlaps don't need to impact their co-parenting. And this is a place where non-monogamous and monogamous concepts can be very helpful to commingle. And we can stop saying, oh, this is just about being a polyamorous. No, it's about a different way to look at relationships.
How do you even ask the questions? Like, let's say you're dating someone and you're like, okay, well, I kind of am having this feeling. How do you even go there? Because you have to like really risk being seen and vulnerable and being like risk losing the person to even bring it up, right?
Yeah, I see this all the time because
like I'm not
like, so much. Okay, here's how it usually comes up in my world. So I run a program called the Year of Opening. So it's a whole year, right? And people often come into it and they're like, okay, so I am either on my own or I'm with a long-term partner. Now with my long-term partner, we came into this, we can definitely have these conversations. Joli's giving us these stretches to do. And so, okay, there's this stretch. We're supposed to sit down and talk about what our relationship purpose is. And it's all outlined for us. And they're like, I can do that. And then we go through different agreement making processes. Okay, I can do that. We can talk about what agreements we have. And that all makes sense to them. However, then there are new partners. And they're like, okay, I've only known this person for 3 weeks. Do I need to have a relationship agreement with them? How do I, wait, when do I ask them what the purpose of this relationship is? and they get scared. They freak out because they're like, I'm doing it. I'm doing the work. I clearly can do the work to have a conscious relationship, but then I'm building these new relationships and I'm freaked out. And I think that this makes me look needy or challenging or problematic or not good relationship material. And first off, we need to change that narrative. So culturally, let's shift that narrative. So in every conversation you have, when someone says that they want more information and they want to share more information with their partners, remember not to use the word needy. Remember that that's healthy relating. So that's the cultural level.
You said that. Thank you.
Let's do that. Let's all do that for each other.
Out there being called needy.
Yeah, we have needs. Hi, welcome.
Hi.
And then on a personal level, what I say is we really do walk into this in a very titrated way. We dose this. We don't sit down and say, okay, we need to make a full relationship agreement and we're going to talk across. I actually have people talk across 25 domains of relating if they are in a full-blown partnership with someone. No, you're not going to do that on week 3 or even necessarily in year 3 for some people. But we can start having a culture of requests being valid and being met, like a request positive culture. And we can start encouraging a culture of having needs, of having bottom line requirements for being in relationship with me. If we start nurturing the idea that we're in a negotiation, an ongoing negotiation. So here's what I recommend. When you're dating someone, start setting that up as your microcultural norm by saying things like, let's say you just met on an app. You say something like, hey, do you want to stay on this app? Would that feel more comfortable for you? Or here are these other 3 apps that I'm comfortable talking on. Or here, I'm comfortable sharing my text. But I'd like to know how you feel about these other apps. No pressure. You wait for that answer. Now you up-level that to, could we just have a quick check-in about communication? I want to make sure that we're on the same page. And I ask something like, are there any times of day that it would be inconvenient for you to receive messages? And are there any apps that would feel really just like you'd forget that they exist? And I just start asking these questions one at a time, sprinkled throughout my introductory conversations with them. And I normalize the idea that we are talking about this. We're having a conversation, a meta conversation about our relationship and how we relate. This is way before there's a define the relationship talk. This is like right out of the gates. And this normalizes it. So when we do get to date 3, it's completely reasonable to say, so I'm really feeling a vibe here. And I think this could go somewhere. Do you want to have a deeper conversation about how this connection could look if we took it to a new physical level? Because now you've already normalized it. Now we can have that conversation. And that's how we take a very slow and steady approach to shifting how we do relationships. And if you change how you do relationships, your relationships will change.
Dr. Joli, this is like such an enlightening conversation. I feel like we could talk forever, like about a lot of different things.
A lot of topics.
I'm trying to have a part 2 with you, homie. So
absolutely. I will be back anytime you ask.
So where can people find you and learn more?
Yeah. So first off, if you're just looking for like, whoa, okay, this non-monogamy thing is just like, I need to know more, but you're not sure what that means and what it might look like. I have a quiz for you. Go to joliquiz.com, joliquiz.com. That is just a 10-question quiz built out of my research to help you understand, are you ready to check out something in the non-monogamous realm? Or do you actually need to like, let's get some foundations under you. Let's get some more relationship education. Let's figure out where you are in that spectrum. And then you'll be introduced to the rest of my work and you'll understand what I'm all about. And if you'd rather catch me on socials, please just find me. You can find me at Dr. Joli _Hamilton on all the socials.
You're amazing. Thank you so much for your time. I've really, truly so enjoyed this conversation. You're a wealth of knowledge. I've loved connecting with you.
Thank you so much for having me and for asking about depth psychology.
Special thanks to Painless Pregnancy for sponsoring today's episode of The Know with Nikki Spo. I am so grateful to have had the opportunity to heal with painless pregnancy after the birth of my 3rd baby, and I want everyone out there to know that they can have happy, healthy pregnancies with the professional help and guidance of the incredible team at Painless Pregnancy. Use my code NikkiSpo10 for 10% off of your first visit and check out painless-pregnancy.com for more information.
Thank you so much for listening to The Know. If you loved this episode, go ahead and share it with a friend. Words are so powerful, and someone may need to hear what we covered today. And if you really loved this episode, please take a moment to rate the show and leave a review. Your comments are so important and valued, and they give other listeners insight on what to expect on The Know. You can connect with me personally via Instagram at Nikki Sap Spo and The Know with Nikki Spo. My hope for you today is that you are fearless in looking inward so that you can be your highest, most authentic self and go after the life of your dreams.